In 1325, a man named Ibn Battuta left Tangier, Morocco, with a donkey and nothing else. No map, no compass, no companion. The journey ahead would take him through 44 countries, more than 120,000 kilometers, over the course of 29 years. He never got significantly lost. He found his way across the Sahara Desert, the steppes of Central Asia, and the rainforests of Africa. Places he had never set foot in before, not because he possessed some extraordinary ability, but because he knew something that most modern people have forgotten. This story has 3 layers. You'll guess the first one immediately. The second will make you look back. The third is happening inside your head right now. You probably think ancient people didn't have addresses. That before house numbers and street names existed, people simply relied on what nature provided: the sun, the stars, and the landscape. They looked to the sky to find north. They followed rivers to find their way. Simple and primitive. Their world was small, so they didn't need to remember much. In 2012, anthropologist Kim Sterlny at the Australian National University analyzed data from more than 40 surviving hunter-gatherer communities. He found that stars, the sun, and terrain accounted for only about 20% of their navigation system. A typical hunter needed to remember the locations of thousands of places within their territory. Seasonal water sources, fruit trees that ripened in specific months, dangerous areas, and the territorial boundaries of neighboring groups. These weren't fixed addresses. They changed with the rain, with the seasons, and from year to year. They didn't remember less than you do. They remembered in a completely different way. Ibn Battuta didn't carry a map. He carried stories. Before every stage of his journey, he asked people who had traveled that route before, and he remembered not the names of places, but the stories attached to them. The well beside the place where a Persian merchant once died of thirst, the hill that looked like a resting camel, the road that turned left at the rock split in 2 by lightning. Every story became an anchor in memory. A chain of stories became the entire journey. The Aboriginal people of Australia had been doing the same thing for at least 65,000 years, longer than any civilization on Earth. They called their system songlines. The entire landscape was encoded into songs. Every verse represented a real section of the journey. The place names, the landmarks, the distance to the next location, and the sacred stories connected to each place. As Aboriginal people traveled across the land, they sang. Every line of the song matched a step on the ground. And when they needed to find the same place months or even years later, they simply sang the song again. Anthropologist Deborah Birdrose spent decades studying this system and described songlines as a GPS that required no batteries. Accurate, reliable, and free from data loss for 65,000 years. She documented elderly Aboriginal people who could sing continuously for hours, describing journeys across territories covering hundreds of square kilometers, including the location of every water source, every shade tree, and every shelter from storms. Every detail was encoded in songs learned from early childhood. So now you understand. The ancient secret was stories, songs, and memories tied to emotion. Interesting. You know the answer now. You could stop here. But the real question hasn't been answered yet. Why do stories work? Why does the human brain remember places better when they're connected to emotions and people instead of house numbers and street names? That question matters more than the one about ancient people, because the answer isn't in the past. It's inside your head. In 2000, neuroscientist Eleanor Maguire at University College London placed 16 London taxi drivers into an fMRI brain scanner. These drivers had completed a process known as the knowledge, memorizing all 25,000 streets of London, a task that takes an average of 4 years. The results stunned the entire research team. The posterior hippocampus of those taxi drivers was significantly larger than that of ordinary people. Its size was directly proportional to their years of experience. The brain doesn't just remember places. It physically changes its shape to do it better. And what Maguire discovered next was even more important. The drivers with the best sense of direction didn't remember routes by house numbers or street names. They remembered them through stories. Turn left where the fire happened in 1987. Go straight to the bakery where customers always leave their umbrellas behind, exactly the way Ibn Battuta and the Aboriginal people had done thousands of years earlier. In 2013, researcher Veronique Bobot at Macy Gill University followed 103 people over several years. Those who relied heavily on GPS showed lower gray matter density in the hippocampus after years of use. GPS doesn't just replace a skill. It is gradually shrinking a part of your brain that your ancestors spent millions of years refining. From Ibn Battuta traveling alone with a donkey and a head full of stories, to the Aboriginal songlines passed from one generation to the next through song, to 65,000 years during which people never lost their way. Then cities grew. People began living in places where they had never had the chance to attach stories to every street. In 1779, Paris introduced house numbers for the first time in history. Not to help people find their way, but to help the government collect taxes and conscript soldiers. For the first time, an address existed on paper instead of inside people's minds. GPS arrived in 1995, within a single generation. About 30 years, a skill that had existed for 65,000 years began to be handed over to a phone. No one consciously decided to make that trade. It happened one day at a time, one tap on a map app at a time, one moment after another in which your brain no longer needed to build an internal map because something else was doing the job. And the human brain does not preserve what it is no longer required to use. Today, if your phone ran out of battery, could you find your way home from a place you visited a few times? Most people in modern cities couldn't. Not because they're less intelligent than Ibn Battuta, but because their brains receive the same message every day. You don't need to remember this. GPS will do it for you. This is what Maguire discovered that few people mention and few scientific reports explain clearly enough. The hippocampus can grow at any age if it is used the right way. Drivers who began learning the knowledge at the age of 45 or 50, not as young students, still experienced significant growth in their hippocampus after 4 years of continuous training. And the hippocampus doesn't just handle navigation. It is the center of long-term memory, learning, and cognitive health in old age. When it shrinks from lack of use, you lose more than just your sense of direction. Your spatial memory hasn't disappeared forever. It's simply asleep because no one has asked it to wake up. Every time you open GPS to go somewhere familiar, your brain receives the message. There's no need to remember this trip. That doesn't have consequences the next day, but a little every day, a little every year. Ibn Battuta returned to Tangier in 1354 after 29 years. He wrote down his entire journey from memory. 120,000 kilometers with no notes, no maps, only the stories he had used to remember the way. That book still exists today. The next time you go somewhere you've been before, try turning off GPS and finding your own way. Attach a story to every turn, or don't. But now you know that it's a real choice, not just about finding your way.